A good evening. Today is Wednesday, July the 3rd, 2024. The time now is 7:02 p.m. Can you protect an American president from international prosecution when that president or when the American presidents do not have domestic immunity? And also, the Trump immunity that the Supreme Court had basically declared, okay, in its recent decision. Does that have any international implication? Okay? For example, one being that there is a tendency that when something happened in the United States and or the West, it basically spreads around the world. Okay? Now, with the Trump immunity decision, there are those who are saying that it solidifies the idea of an imperial president or an imperial presidency. Okay? If that is the case, could we be seeing the rise of an imperial president or imperial presidency around the world? Could we be seeing that? Now, I want to talk briefly about the situation in the United States, okay, relating to the recent Trump case, okay, with the Supreme Court deciding that Donald Trump or the American president do have official immunity, okay, or they do have immunity for official actions or official acts. I do believe that the decision is basically grounded on American domestic politics or policies, okay, relating to the United States Constitution. However, I also do believe that it has an international implication. That given that the power of the United States, okay, the prestige of the United States, the exceptionalism that the United States often project or propagate to the rest of the world, it seems to center on the power and the prestige or the strength of the American president, okay, as projected to the rest of the world, okay? The American president being able to project strength and power and being above the law, okay, or being an individual that doesn't do any wrong. It seems it is projected and promoted to the rest of the world as much as to Americans themselves. And that is the way I basically look at the Supreme Court's decision. The whole notion that the American president or Donald Trump does have an official immunity. Now, the decision is basically pissing off a lot of people in the United States, and lots of Democrats and liberals are very much angry. Okay, they are mad at the decision. And it is very interesting. And for Donald Trump, this basically gave him about three major victories in a week or within a week. So, the United States is a country that is divided on the line of sectionalism. Factions run the United States. And this is something that even the first president of the United States, okay, George Washington, won the nation, okay, to stay away from political parties, which basically would lead to the rise of factions. The Democrats, the Republicans, these are all factions, okay? The liberals, the conservatives, these are factions. Every 4 year, the lucky faction or the one that basically was able to raise the most amount of money, that was basically able to influence the people more or convince the people, basically get the majority of the vote, winning the election. That faction basically take over in January, okay, of the following year, following the election, and basically imposed its will, okay, carry out its activities, sometimes basically violating the rules. and the others, basically, or the other, okay? Because we are talking about two sides of the same coin. The other basically can do nothing about it, especially when the other party is basically a minority within the Congress. So factions run the United States, okay? When the faction basically control the presidency, the faction can basically enact American policy or policies around the world, or the policy of that faction domestically. And then for the other faction, it's the same thing. Now, if the faction that is in the White House also control the court, this basically means that that faction that controls the White House is also the majority in the Supreme Court. Basically, that faction is secure because that faction can violate the rules and basically the Supreme Court will side with them. That is basically what we are seeing, okay? Donald Trump basically appointed 3 of the 6 conservative justices. So basically, one could say that they sided with Donald Trump. But then the question that I want to ask, had Donald Trump been a Democrat, while 6 conservative justices are in the Supreme Court, would they have granted Donald Trump immunity? Would they have decided that Donald Trump does have an official or presidential immunity? There are those who will basically say no. So it is very interesting that sectionalism and faction are basically running the United States. They are basically imposing their wills or carrying out their policy, okay? While the other faction that is not in power or that doesn't have the majority basically has to take it as it is, as it comes. Now, in the United States, many of the radical actions that American presidents carry out, okay, or enact, the conservative president or Republican presidents are basically known to basically carrying out very harsh activities or actions, okay? And I do believe to an extent the Supreme Court's decision wasn't so much an ethical decision or a logical decision in the sense of non-bias, but it was a biased decision. It was a self-preservation, okay? A decision based on self-preservation. Because if the court hasn't decided that Donald Trump does have an immunity, that means they can go after Donald Trump on any violation, which in this case means they can go after the United States president in any case or for any violation, which in this case will basically limit the American president's power, or I do believe it could make American presidents very much afraid to carry out their actions, especially the radical actions, okay? Whether we are talking about actions that emphasize, protect, and promote the policies or the activities of their section or their factions, or the activities that basically promote, defend, maintain, and propagate American dominance or American exceptionalism around the world. If it is that American presidents can be persecuted, and if so, found guilty and punished accordingly based on the American Constitution, if that can happen, which also means that they can go after the American presidents for any violation, which if that is the case, it makes it difficult for the American government to protect American presidents internationally for violations that they commit internationally. So once again, I do believe that the Supreme Court decision to grant Donald Trump immunity or declaring that Donald Trump has official immunity I do believe it is more than just constitutional ethics, okay, relating to the United States. I do believe it is more than that. It is international. It is a means to protect American president domestically when that president, in this case we are talking about a Republican president, okay, enact policies or basically commit actions that protect and promote the policies of his section, okay, or of his faction, the Republicans. Basically, they are going to protect him and defend him with the idea of presidential immunity. But then, this also is going to protect Democratic presidents as well. It is going to protect American presidents, period. Recently, we have the ICC basically going after Vladimir Putin, okay? Issuing arrest warrant against Vladimir Putin and also issuing arrest warrant against the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. With the United States president not having domestic national immunity at home in the United States, it becomes difficult, I do believe, to protect and defend him internationally when he commit crimes that violate international laws. It becomes difficult to protect him from international prosecution or prosecutors. So I do believe it is not ethics as relating to the United States Constitution alone. This basically the act or the attempt or the action of granting Donald Trump or declaring Donald Trump having immunity, official presidential immunity, is a self-preservation activity as well by the Republican slash conservative Supreme Court or conservative-led Supreme Court or conservative-dominated Supreme Court. But it is very interesting because I do believe Donald Trump, when he comes back, he could basically go after his enemies, okay? He could basically come into the presidency again with a vengeance, okay? If he decide to go after his personal enemies and the enemies of the conservatives slash Republicans slash the far right. The whole idea of him having immunity, okay? Because lots of the things that he is going to be doing could be placed under the category of official action or official act. He can basically randomly declare this or that, him or her, a terrorist. It is an official act. So we are in the most dangerous phase in American politics and also in international politics. But the whole idea of declaring that the American presidents or presidencies have immunity, there could be a possibility of this spreading around the world, most especially in the West. We could begin to see in Europe, perhaps Britain always, or the United Kingdom, always go after the United States in that once the United States does something, the United Kingdom, okay, or Britain copies. So we could begin to see similar activities, or if not legislation being passed in the UK, okay, declaring that the British Prime Minister, okay, or Prime Ministers do have immunity under the guise of official act. We could see that in France, in Germany, in Spain, all over the West, in Canada, in Australia, and around the world. So I do believe as a global community, we need to pay attention and we need to begin to think how what is happening in the United States and to a greater extent in the West, how they basically the activities could impact us in the greater global community. So within a week, Donald Trump basically won or basically secured 3 major victories over Joe Biden and the Democrats. One being that he won the recent presidential debate, which took place June the 27th. Okay, Donald Trump won that debate not because of ethics or because of substance. He won that debate because he looked young and healthier than Joe Biden. Okay? He looked less chaotic than Joe Biden, and he did not enact the classic Trump actions or activities. He basically did not interrupt as he often does. He did not scream or shout across the stage as he often does. He maintained composure. Yes, he made a lot of faces as Joe Biden spoke, but okay, he was much civil, and his taunting of Joe Biden was less chaotic than usual. So, in terms of substance, it was the classic Trump. He said things that couldn't be or cannot be substantiated. He basically called all immigrants a bunch of terrorists and rapists and criminals. He dog whistled, okay, a lot. But because he managed to look healthier, or because he looked healthier and much more sound than Joe Biden, he won the debate. Also, possibly because of the debate, his victory in the debate, he went up in the poll. And I do remember prior to the debate, Joe Biden was slightly ahead of Donald Trump in the polls. Okay? After the debate, Trump basically went surging in the polls. And as of now, he is basically destroying Joe Biden in the polls. And it was so bad for Joe Biden that even Democrats are feeling sorry for him. To the point where right now, there are talks out there of a possible Michelle Obama's candidacy, which if that happens, I do believe it's going to look bad for the Democrats, because it gives the Republicans ammunition to basically say, look at these guys. How are you guys treating the president like that? Or even Kamala Harris. Because by jumping over Kamala Harris and choosing Michelle Obama, it creates a constitutional, or it creates an ethic issue, I do believe, for the Democrats. Okay? Perhaps they could pull it off, because the truth is, recently, talks are coming out that the strongest Democrat who could actually defeat Donald Trump in the polls is Michelle Obama. I think about 60% or so are saying that they could vote for Michelle Obama. Okay? About 60% of people who are polled. So, because Michelle Obama basically is the strongest candidate for the Democratic ticket that could defeat Donald Trump in the election in November, perhaps it creates a wiggle room for the Democrats to jump over Kamala Harris and basically choose Michelle Obama as their front runner. But I think if they do that, then they still will have to run Kamala Harris in the ticket or on the ticket for respect purpose. Now, the second victory for Donald Trump was that he surged in the poll. And then the third major victory for Donald Trump within 1 week is that the Supreme Court basically has declared, or had declared about 2 or 3 days ago, that Donald Trump does have presidential immunity on the grounds that the action that he commits, okay, if it is an official action. But then what official action is or could be is actually broad as well, because Donald Trump could come back into the presidency and go after a whole lot of people and declaring his action an official action for the protection and defense of the United States, blah, blah, blah. So within 1 week or so, Donald Trump managed to secure about 3 major victories over Joe Biden and the Democrats. One being that he defeated Joe Biden in the presidential debate by not looking chaotic and looking healthy, or healthier than Joe Biden. 2 being that after the debate, he surged in the poll to the point where now he is leading Joe Biden. Let's assume that he stay away from controversy or controversies. In this case, there is possibility that he is going to maintain, and I'm talking about Donald Trump, he is going to maintain dominance in the poll over Joe Biden until the election. The third victory for Donald Trump over Joe Biden and the Democrat is that, once again, the Supreme Court declared that Donald Trump has immunity or presidential immunity. Now, I want to hear what you think. Okay, please give me a comment, join the conversation. But before I end, I want to read the description for this program, which I do believe also can serve as a summary, a conclusion, and it does pose some questions as well. For this this brief talk, the title is TAHIUSSADP Episode 2. U.S. Supreme Court grants Donald Trump immunity. Once again, I'm going to read the title. The title for this talk is TAHIUSSADP Episode 2. U.S. Supreme Court grants Donald Trump immunity. TAHIUSSADP stands for Trends and Headlines in U.S. Society and Domestic Politics. Once again, TAHIUSSADP stands for Trends and Headlines in U.S. Society and Domestic Politics. I'm going to read. Can you protect an American president from international prosecution when he does not even have immunity at home in the United States? Once again, can you protect an American president from international prosecution when he does not even have immunity at home in the United States? What international implication does Trump's domestic United States immunity have on our global community, if any? Once again, what international implications does Trump's domestic United States immunity have on our global community, if any? The U.S. Supreme Court, in a 6-3 partisan decision, declared that former President Donald Trump does have presidential immunity for official acts, sending the Trump case to a district court. This decision was one of 3 major victories for the former president within a week. While the decision strongly has constitutional implication domestically in the United States, it could also be an attempt to promote, protect, defend, and maintain the dominance and exceptionality of the United States through presidential power and prestige. And the reason for this, I do believe, because the United States for the past decades and years has basically propagated the notion of a mighty American president, of a wise man, okay? Or maybe in the future, a wise woman who knows all. A wise man in this case, who is very strong, who is basically a killer of criminal or whatsoever. If you can prosecute the United States president, okay, the American president, in this case, it is going to damage the American people and the American nation, the psyche of the Americans, okay? Emotionally, psychologically, it is going to damage Americans, okay? If it is that the American president, okay, based on the notion of power, prestige, strength, and knowledge, smartness that the United States, based on its media, okay, apparatus, based on its control and or dominance, okay, of information, has propagated to the rest of the world. If it becomes the reality that the American president can commit a crime and can be prosecuted and punished in accordance with the law, okay, based on the crime that he commits or that she commits, it basically, okay, for certain faction in the United States, it makes them and it makes America or the American presidency weak. The Americans basically emphasize strength, okay, and dominance over the world in 2 ways. Forget all the notion of freedom and democracy nonsense. No. One being the military, and two being the prestige and the perceived power and strength and wiseness and smartness of its president, okay, or presidents. I'm going to continue. Questions or comments? Number one, given the situation in Ukraine, the cracks in the Western alliance, and the resurgence of the far right in the United States and in Europe, how does Trump's return impact the United States, the West, and the rest? In this case, the rest means the global South, the rest of humanity that is not part of the conceptual white West. Number two, would Joe Biden have pardoned Donald Trump? Honestly, I do believe, had they sentenced Donald Trump, Joe Biden would have pardoned Donald Trump, because pardoning Donald Trump does protect Joe Biden as well, and all American presidents before and after Joe Biden. This includes George Bush, Barack Obama, and future presidents as well. Number three, what would have been the possible consequences of the United States Supreme Court not pardoning Donald Trump, or not declaring that Donald Trump has presidential immunity, or that the American presidents have immunity for official acts, and why? Number four, due to the tendency of events in the United States and the West spreading worldwide, could we see the rise of the imperial presidency worldwide? If so, should countries worldwide begin to pass laws to strip immunity for their presidents and ensure that their presidents, can be prosecuted for crimes committed before, during, and after their presidency? Why or why not? Number five, is it possible that an American president is vulnerable to prosecution, and having no domestic immunity to the law makes him susceptible to prosecution by the international community? Number six, by now it is clear that judges appointed by a particular president tend to side with that president. Therefore, given this reality, should the court be independent of presidential influence? If so, could there also be a potential consequence, and why? Number seven, 3 of the 6 conservative justices were appointed by Donald Trump. Number 8, had Donald Trump been a Democrat, would the 6 conservative justices declare immunity for him? Why or why not? Thank you very much for watching. Please tell me what you think. Okay? Please join the conversation. But once again, thank you very much for watching The Echoing Voice. Peace.